nurse, you are very much at risk of being a target for malpractice suit. If you think about the fact that there are 70,000 and there were over 100,000 lawsuits against RNs, you are at risk. The good thing is that hopefully these nurses, thank you, Derek. The good thing is that hopefully these nurses were charting. They were following policies and procedures. And so with only 3,000 out of 70,000, it's closer to 4,000. So about 4,000 payments out of 70,000 nurses. That means that nurses are, for the most part, paying close attention and they're avoiding risk. This is one of the reasons that I gave you the Legal Eagle-I newsletters to read. And I was really interested as I read the discussion boards. I could tell most of you really had some aha moments. A lot of you were surprised about things. Some of you were a little bit unhappy about things. You felt like maybe some of them were unfair or maybe a little bit trivial. And so we'll talk about those because a couple of you thought a little bit deeper, particularly the cell phone one. But I want to talk with you about the cell phone one because that's one that I seem to get the most reaction from you. And you're pretty similar to other classes in the past. That seems to be it's a pretty hot topic of conversation. But I want to go through it just a little bit more closely. And there were a number of warning signs that were really concerning about that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, just before we go on to that, I'm going to really quickly brief you about some things that you were interested in and some that you weren't so interested in. Outcomes for the course. You put number 4, which is was described as sources and types of law. This isn't hugely important immediately to your practice, but it's good for you to have a basic understanding. So I'm going to give you just a really quick overview on this. Primary sources in the United States, the primary sources of laws are, what's the number 1 source of law in the United States? You guys know this from like another class, high school?
Oh, are you talking about like the Constitution?
Thank you. Very good, Alex. Number 1, the first source of laws is the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. The second is the state constitutions. Then you've got federal and state statutes. Okay, so these are laws that the Congress makes. Okay. The next one is common law. Do you know what common law is?
Local?
Common law comes from England, actually, with the colonies. And so these were things like divorces. They're things that have just kind of always existed. So although there may not be specific laws about them, common law is used as a basis for finding court cases. The next one is case law. Yes, Hannah.
Sorry, this is kind of unrelated, but for this stuff, do you want us to be putting our notes on last week's e-prep for like this information?
My suggestion would be that you take a few notes, but you might, if you want, but you don't have to. You can put them wherever you want.
Okay.
Okay.
Just checking. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good because this week would be the leadership, and at 11:15, we're going to have Misty Gordon, who is a manager at Madison Hospital, but she also was the head of quality improvement, and I think she'll probably talk with you about both. And so this sort of covers that, but then we're going to cover some more on leadership. Okay. However, make sure that you're doing your reading because really the essentials that you need are in the reading. Hopefully what this does is this solidifies. Anyway, sorry.
No,
we're kind of all over the place on that. Okay, and then finally is administrative law. And administrative law is the law that is created by federal, what do you call it? Federal administrative agencies. So, so let me give you a couple that you'll probably recognize. So the Social Security Administration is the administrative agency that implements Social Security and disability, right? And so you had better follow the Social Security laws because they are laws. You have to pay the taxes. You have to follow the rules and regulations in order to draw Social Security. So those are laws, but they're created by an administrative body, not by Congress. Yes.
I'm sorry,
Jamie.
Do you want us taking notes on this week's e-prep or last week's? Just so I know, because if you look at it and then you'd be like, that has nothing to do with the other. Oh, you did?
Where was I? Was I sleeping?
Clearly asked that, but
Sorry.
Hannah, what did I tell you?
That you can put your notes wherever.
What?
You can.
You can put them wherever.
I swear I was here the whole time.
If you want to go back and, you know, the one that you've already turned in, I know that you turned it in, you're welcome to just put your notes on there, you don't need to turn it in. If you want to put it on the screen, and just say, okay, this is a part of leadership because it is, you're welcome to do that, okay? All right, so another one would be OSHA. That's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, so you know how you have to do safety and OSHA testing before you can work at your, as a nurse, so that's required by that. Now, what would be another administrative agency that is going to affect you guys that makes laws? I'll give you a hint, it's in every state.
The council?
State board of nursing, exactly. So when we looked at the Nurse Practice Act a few weeks ago, it was written in legal language, was it not? And that creates the rules and the laws in the state of Idaho and every other state. If you disobey them, there can be penalties, there can be fines, there could be imprisonment, and there certainly can be loss of license. Okay. So let's see, the next one that you were least interested in was the impact of the Nurse Practice Act on nursing practice and legal issues. So we pretty much covered that, but there's just a few things that I would like you to know. This is kind of a summary of everything that we've done, and we probably won't go back over this again. So the responsibilities of the Board of Nursing from each state, they vary a little bit. Shut that door. People out in the hall. Luckily, it's a big enough room, we don't get too hot. Okay, so what they do is they accredit and approve nursing programs. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but BYU Idaho, in order to have a nursing program, it has to be approved by the State Board of Nursing in Idaho. There are quite a few specific things that we have to follow. For example, our faculty have to be at least master's prepared. Or in a program, a master's degree nursing program, if they're doing clinical, that they will graduate from within 3 years. So there are things like that. They develop practice standards, okay, the things that you have to do, essentially what is within your scope of practice. What can an RN do that an LPN can't do? So the state board determines those. They also develop policies, again, administrative rules and regulations. And they also are in charge of addressing violations of the Nurse Practice Act. So here are some violations of the Nurse Practice Act that should be reported. And we've talked a little bit about this. I know that as students, it feels concerning, the idea of reporting other nurses. Do you even know what you would report? We talked about drug use, didn't we? Coming to work intoxicated. Do you know what else you would report?
Abuse.
Falsifying
Okay, falsifying documentation. Very good, Savannah. Okay, so I'll just go over these really quickly. You can tell me if this is a surprise or not. Okay, impairment by drugs or alcohol, we know that. What about stealing from a patient or client, including their medications? So this could be in home health. It certainly has happened, you know, that nurses or CNAs go into a patient's home and, you know, there's a whole medicine chest full of narcotics. And it can be a huge temptation. Providing treatment or care that should be provided only by a physician or an APRN. We've had cases of nurses doing minor surgeries on patients, totally out of their scope. If you do that, you can lose your license. So you need to make sure that you're within your scope of practice.
Yeah, when you say minor surgery, like what are you referring to? Like tonsillectomy or like?
Well, let me tell you about a patient that I took care of several years ago. This was a patient, a little about a 2-year-old girl who had a tracheostomy. And what had happened was, she was with her mother, and her mother was depressed and upset, so she drove off of a cliff down by Bryce, Utah, with the baby in the car, not in the car seat. And so the baby was pretty badly injured. And so some passerby came along, and it looked like the baby probably wasn't going to make it. And so a nurse off duty came, took a pencil, poked a hole, created a tracheostomy. So, and then had an bamboo bag in her car, and she ambooed the baby until the ambulance got there. The hole was too big. There were all kinds of problems. So, you know, a year later, the baby still had a tracheostomy. We were still doing dressing changes. Don't know for sure what happened to the baby, but it was problematic. Adrenaline was probably rushing. It was an emergency situation. She had gone over a cliff. They were at the bottom of a cliff. This nurse was the only person around who had medical knowledge. Probably she felt like she was doing what was best to save the life of the baby, and she did probably save the life of the baby. But the baby probably will have a disability. Essentially, will have a medical condition for the rest of her life.
Isn't that protected by the Good Samaritan?
How
did they know she was a nurse?
To create a hole.
How did they know she was a nurse?
Because she told them.
That's why.
No, Alex, I'll tell you what, even if you haven't said you're a nurse, that would still be prosecutable. You just don't do that.
So if your normal citizen did that, would they be prosecuted?
Probably, because that's pretty invasive. That really goes beyond being a good Samaritan.
Just let him die.
It's a problem. It's a huge ethical problem, and so you need to think about that. You know, it's possible that you could go to the state board, and it could be that you could give a good enough case to make it happen. But that's what happened in this case. I don't know. You know, I came on a couple of years later. You know, so you know, the family told me the story. Obviously, families can be biased, so it doesn't. You know, bottom line is, be careful that you're not doing things out of your scope of practice. Yes.
I don't know where I heard this. I thought somebody said that if you've had training on doing a tracheostomy, whatever you want to call it, then you can do it as a nurse. Is that true? Or
I think it would depend. It would depend on the scope of practice in the state. So, you know, it may vary from state to state, but that's why you need to understand what you can do and what's in your scope of practice and what's not. JB, and then Alex.
I was just wondering, what if you work for a doctor who kind of lets you or shows you and walks you through things? Are you allowed to do that?
Again, check with your state and make sure. Hopefully a doctor wouldn't, but I do know of nurses, you know, who do minor sutures, and it may or may not be out of their scope of practice. Again, it depends. You know, it depends on what they've been trained. It depends on what they're allowed to do. So that's why, and a lot of you mentioned this. Know what the policies and procedures are. Document. There were several things that came out, and I hope you read enough of the postings on the discussion that you really came away with a firm resolve that you're going to know what it is that you can do and what you can't do, and that you're going to document, because even if you document only exceptions, how many patients do you think you're going to see in a year? Just make a guess. Should we say 3,000? That's a reasonable number, isn't it? Okay, let's say that it's 5 years later and you get sued. By now you've had 15,000 patients. Do you really think you're going to remember the one patient that you only did exception charting on? Now that doesn't mean you can't do exception charting, but what it means, if there's anything unusual, you need to be aware. You need to protect yourself, and if there's something that you think could potentially be a problem later, and some of you mentioned using the Holy Ghost, you know, as a guide, and I think that having a prayer, you know, every day before you go to shift certainly as protection. And that's a wonderful thing that we can talk about this, being in a church nursing program, and that each of you can do as personal protection. But I would really encourage you to do those kinds of things so that you can take careful care of yourself. Alex.
So we went over this a lot when I was getting my EMT certificate, and so even if you do have authorized training to do something that you can't do at the facility that you work at, you shouldn't do it ever, unless the facility allows you and expands your depth and breadth of practice, because it all comes down to not just your license, but who's providing you with the experience and education. So it's kind of risky, because you might want to continue your education and gain more skills and certificates and knowledge, but don't practice any of that unless you can't do it if you can't do it at work. Because there have been a lot of EMTs that they're training for advanced skills or to be a paramedic, and so it's kind of a bummer that, and EMTs, they told us never state your skill, because if you say, oh, I'm this, then you're more likely to get sued. So if you say, oh, I'm a nurse, I'll help, then if someone says, oh, well, you're a nurse, you should have saved them, or you're an EMT, or you're a doctor, and they don't, then you're going to get sued, and you're probably going to lose a lot of money. So they encouraged us that if we can help, then do the minimal, and then if we do help, don't say anything about our experience if we're questioned.
The problem with that is, are you gonna run away before the cops come and like do a statement? Because they're gonna take down your name and they're gonna be able to do a fast search that says that you're a nurse or that you're an EMT, and they're like, well, they withhold that information. And in some states, like in California, it's the law. You have to state that you are either an EMT or you are a nurse. And if they find out that you left or anything like that before a statement was made by you, or they could get your report, then you will lose your license.
But you don't have to say it to the family.
Don't tell any civilians.
I guess it's true.
So it's really important, again, to make sure that you understand what the rules and regulations are in each state. Alex, you make a couple of really good points. I have seen people who have been EMTs or paramedics who then become nurses. And in the heat of the moment, they do things that they could do and were allowed to do as a paramedic, but it's not within the nursing scope of practice. So again, think carefully. The other thing is that, remember, with 70,000 lawsuits against RNs, with 70,000 RNs and 100,000 lawsuits against them, but only 3,000 that paid out, here's the situation. You could get sued, and they might not win, but tell me, how many of you want to get sued? You know what, that is a major disruption to your life, the anxiety and stress that it causes, even if the other person doesn't win. So I can tell you it's very painful for the 100,000 people that were sued for something, even if only 3,000, had payments out. So you just plain don't want to be sued either. Okay? All right, now, we were talking about violations of the Nurse Practice Act. Another being falsifying records, and I think you said that, Savannah, is that you? Boundary issues. Here is something we haven't talked about yet, but we will. Boundary issues are huge. What happens if you have a romantic relationship with a patient? Is that a problem? It most certainly is. Particularly if it ends up a sexual relationship. Because the patient is considered, well, you'd be surprised how many times that happens. I'm so sorry, but it does.
Especially in rural areas.
It happens everywhere.
Treat everybody in the community. What are you gonna do?
So I don't know, please don't answer this question, but think about how many of you have had a total crush on a teacher or a doctor or somebody who helps you. Okay, now reverse that. You're the person helping. You're there every day. You're attractive. You're professional. You seem to have it all together. your patients are going to fall in love with you. It's just that. So you need to be really careful and you need to really watch those boundaries. And probably one of the best that I used to teach my nurses when I was an administrator of an agency. I would suggest to them, if you ever move into a conversation with a patient that you would be embarrassed for me to hear, or you wouldn't want me to hear, you've got boundary violations. And so I really want you to think about that. That is a wonderful rule of thumb, so that if you start to have a conversation with a patient that you wouldn't want your boss to hear, stop. Okay? And then finally, involvement in criminal conduct. So now, how do you file a complaint with the Board of Nursing? Does anybody know? Can you walk us through that in 3 sentences? Okay, let me walk you through in 3 sentences. The Board of Nursing needs enough information to determine if the individual is a licensed nurse or somebody who is not yet licensed but has applied. They need to know whether the alleged behavior, if it's true, is a violation of the law or a rule enforced by the Board of Nursing that they can enforce. If not, it needs to go to the police or someone else. But if it's a nursing violation, they need to know that. And then you need to provide detailed information about the situation, including names, dates, times, and places. You've all heard of frivolous lawsuits. There are frivolous complaints too. So you need to really have your ducks in a row if you're going to file a complaint. Okay. Can somebody get in trouble for filing a report if the Board of Nursing determines that a violation really didn't occur? Can you get in trouble? Okay. This is the answer. Most states have laws that protect the complainant, the person who's filing a complaint against somebody, from civil liability when a complaint is filed when acting in good faith. What's the difference between a civil suit and a criminal suit?
So just when you want to sue somebody else?
Yeah, civil is just kind of you want to sue because you want to sue. And so, most states, you need to find out if your state protects you from filing in good faith. Yeah.
So, but I mean, like, this would be different than if someone's just filing stuff all the time, just because they don't like their coworkers or something. So, I mean, like you said, it's in good faith. So if they get continuous complaints from the same person, they'll probably take a look at this one
They'll
person.
probably mount an investigation.
Yeah,
against you.
so I mean, like, it's probably limited, and you want to make sure that it's only something when violations actually happen. So that's when it's protecting of the complainant.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, is the name of the complainant kept confidential? We kind of all want to know that too, don't we? Here's the answer. Most states protect the identity of a complainant. However, if someone is a key witness to the conduct in question, he or she may be asked for more information that will be needed in the case. So typically, your name will be kept confidential. However, if they need more question, if it has to go before the board and you have to be named, you would I'm sure you would have a chance to either agree or not agree. Okay, and what happens once a complaint is filed? So what they do is they review it carefully and they make sure make sure that the evidence is gathered, that interviews were conducted. They might ask you for additional information, and the accused person can be asked to respond in writing, or they can have a full investigation with site visits and witnesses. So there's a number of ways that it can happen. Okay, and then the proceedings essentially are what they do is they let the person know that they've been accused of something. The person has an opportunity to respond and tell their side of the story. And then what they can do is they can have an informal conference, which means that just a few of the board members, like the head of the State Board of Nursing, would meet with them, or they can have a full formal hearing, and that's similar to a trial where you would have witnesses, where you would have people helping to represent you. And what you need to understand is that all board actions are public record. So, if you ever want some really interesting reading, you can go, on the Idaho Board of Nursing website. What they do is they have to post the minutes of their meetings, and usually at the end, they have a whole list of all of the people, their names, what they, have been complained about, and what the board action is. Okay, if you are the subject of a complaint and recognize you may not always be the complainant, somebody could complain against you, what do? You contact the Board of Nursing immediately and know that the investigation will be handled in a fair and appropriate manner, and they have a process in place so that you have a fair opportunity to have your rights. And you'll also have a Board of Nursing representative who will walk you through the process and explain it to you. So essentially, maybe they're not an advocate, but they're a person who will help you and guide you. Anna?
You said contact the Board of Nursing immediately, so do they contact you then?
Usually they contact you first, but then what you're going to want to do is respond and contact them back immediately. You don't just ignore it and tell them to go away.
Would you find out that you're being complained against by someone else, or would you find out from the board when they
You
contact?
would find out from the board. Now, it's possible that somebody may say, I'm going to report you to the board. And so you could probably wait a few days and then contact the board and see if, a complaint has been filed against you.
You can't beat them up before they make the complaint.
You could.
Okay.
That's actually a problem. Now,
Could you ever report yourself, so you know you did like someone who's stealing drugs or something? Be like, I have a complaint, they could go to the board and just tell them what
you can, and actually, if you go to the board first, they're typically a lot, more willing to work with you. They have what they call diversionary programs, and so with those, they can put you in one of those, and it helps you, again, do you remember my colleague I told you about that, essentially he stood in front of the camera, and because he realized later that he really wanted to be caught, he needed to be caught. And so he went in, he was very willing to work with them, and, so he was eventually able to work in nursing again, but there were just, some clear rules in place that he agreed with. Yeah.
In that situation, would you go straight to the board, or would you talk to like your nurse manager, or start lower in the chain of it?
I think that would be a personal decision. If it was a nurse manager that you really, really trusted, you might want to go to human resources, although they may choose, to terminate you. It really depends on the situation. Probably the safest thing, in terms of just leaves not occurring, would be to go to the State Board of Nursing. Yes, Emma?
Wait, so were you saying that if that person that wanted help just went to the, oh, okay.
She was asking who would be the best first person to go to, whether it would be like a nurse manager or the Board of Nursing.
But if you were just reporting this to the nurse manager, they would fire you?
No, I said if you went to human resources.
Oh,
So if you went to your boss, who's the nurse manager, they have, because they're your boss, they could advocate for you. And they probably know, what can be done. If you went straight to human resources, they're a little bit more cut and dried, and often they're not, remember they're human resources of an entire hospital. And so, anyway, I just, if I was going to keep it in hospital, I would probably go to my manager first, as long as I trusted that person. Okay, that's just my advice. You'll have to make your own decision. Okay, now, I wanted to move along quickly. Potential risk management. So I'd like to tell you what research shows, because this is your second most valuable one. So the critical risk management areas in nursing. So what this is, describe potential risk management issues and decide how to minimize those. So you probably already know this, some of you wrote this, but delegation is probably number one. Can you see why that's a huge risk management issue? You have to know what you're doing when you delegate. The second is staffing levels. If you're a nurse manager and you have inadequate staff nursing levels, you already know that you're going to compromise patient safety, right? Staff competencies. What if you hire staff who aren't competent? You have to have a training program in place, and then your documentation system. So those are the 4 top areas of risk management.
Could you repeat those quickly?
Yes, delegation, staffing needs, staff competency, and documentation system. Okay, so what should you focus your risk management on? Probably the first thing would be that you have competent staff. If you've got incompetent staff, you've got a lot of problems. The second, and right up here with this, would be meeting state licensure requirements. If you don't meet state licensure, there is, again, you're going to run into problems and you'll get shut down eventually. But if you're meeting the state licensure requirements, then you've got a kind of a safety net built in. Achieving payment for care. Now, what if you're caring for patients on your unit, but things keep happening? They get infections, they are rehospitalized too soon, all of the things that make it so you don't get paid. Would that be a signal to you that you might have some risk management issues? So you need to be getting paid for your patients. Another one would be voluntary accreditation. Most hospitals and other healthcare institutions now choose to have joint commission accreditation. It's a pretty high standard, but again, if you achieve that, you're achieving a lot of things that will mitigate your risk. The next one is documentation. This is a personal thing. The others are things that your institution has to do, but you need to document who, what, when, where, why, and how in your care. And sometimes it's a good idea to over-document if you can. If you're in certain situations where you just have this feeling that this could be problematic later, make a note. Okay, and then this is what the American Nurses Association says. The credibility of the information of a medical record is very difficult to refute. Because of this, the medical record is the nurse's best defense in the event of a lawsuit. So if you've got something down and it comes back to it later, that's probably what your best defense is. Okay, now the first one, but before we do that, we've got about 15 minutes, and I did want to go over some of the Legal Eagle newsletter issues that I'm sure you've got questions about. Did any of you have any questions about any of the definitions or questions?
For week 8.
This is for week 8. So some of you seem to be a little bit weak on negligence versus malpractice. Do you feel like, most of you, do you feel like you have that now? Let me just give you an example. Let's say that you're going to cross the street. As a pedestrian, you're supposed to look both ways, right? Before you cross the street. So a person who doesn't do this and they cause an accident to happen, before they walk into it, they fail to conform to the standard of how you're supposed to cross the street. They did not act as a reasonable person would, right? So they could get ticketed for that. They could get cited, right? Okay. So let's say you've got a nurse who administers the wrong medication to the wrong patient. This is malpractice because she had been trained, she was a professional, he or she, and knew what they should be administering to the patient. Now let's say that same nurse was walking home and walked out into the street without looking both ways and caused an accident. Is that nurse, because they're a professional, going to get sued for malpractice or for negligence? Good. Does that help you a little bit? So negligence means that you do something that a reasonable person wouldn't. But malpractice includes negligence, but it can include a lot of other things besides that.
Includes more of like the professional negligence, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, I think you're good with that. several people missed. I'd like to go over that really quickly. What can happen when an employer is held liable and is required to pay damages because of an employee's negligent actions? We had a whole spectrum on that. Who knows the right answer? What can happen if you do something that was negligent or was even malpractice and your employer gets sued? Can they get sued, first of all? Yes. And what's the terminology? Respondeat superior, right? And that means that you can't do double injury to a patient by both injuring them and then there's nobody to pay for it. And so that's why if the nurse can't pay for it, or regardless, the person who has the most money, and that's going to be the healthcare facility, they're going to have to pay for it initially. But then what can happen?
They countersue. So the
Okay,
hospital,
yeah.
the hospital will sue the nurse.
Okay, the hospital can turn around and sue the nurse. What else?
Fire them.
Yeah.
Yeah, just disciplinary action from the facility.
Okay.
So
disciplinary action.
they might have to be monetary liable, but then they'll still fire the nurse because they don't want to be liable again
Okay.
for employing someone who caused this accident to happen.
Okay. So that kind of helps them move the responsibility so that they understand there really was somebody responsible, but it wasn't me as the hospital, right?
Mhm.
What else can happen? There's one other thing. Potentially, yes, I would say that if the hospital countersues, they're probably going to try to take action against the nurse's license. So then, but that is outside of the civil court, that goes to the board of nursing. And so the board of nursing will cover that. There's still one more thing. And then,
Sue the patient?
say that.
Would they, well, I was thinking about the hospital going back against the patient. Cause if, I don't know.
You know, if it was clearly established that, you know, you've got your 6 things that have, sorry, that's 5, here's 6. You've got all 6 things that have to happen in order for a lawsuit to be paid on, right? There has to be negligence or malpractice. There has to be something that happened as a result. I'm skipping some of these, and there has to be harm that occurred. So you can't sue somebody just because they did a poor job and they didn't do something they shouldn't, but you got out there and you were okay. Injury has to have occurred. Okay, so here's the other thing that can happen. This is relatively new. In the past, nurses were considered the doctor's handmaidens. And so really the doctors got sued or the hospital got sued. But now because nurses have more of an independent practice, the patient may sue both the institution and the nurse. So you still can be sued by the patient, even if they sue the institution too. Ryan,
Are we going to talk about how to protect yourself from things like this?
we have a little bit, but would you like to talk some more about it?
Well, because so my wife is interviewing for jobs, and they asked her if she has her own personal malpractice insurance. She looked it up, and it's only $15 for like the entire year, so it's very cheap and stuff. But at what point do those insurance companies like step in and help protect you, or do they use lawyers and stuff like that, or are they there to like pay whatever you're getting sued for?
No, well, it depends. Insurance companies never want to pay out if they can help it, and so certainly, if they think there's any question, that they have good lawyers that they'll send in behalf of the client. So, if it's a cut and dried case, the nurse is clearly at fault. Sometimes they'll do it, but you know, medical malpractice suits, as you can see from the ones you read, they're kind of all over the place, and so typically, I think it would go to court, you know, unless it was just so clear that they couldn't win. So did you want to talk about malpractice?
No, I
Did you
guess
say that or
what I'm
not?
mostly asking is, from your experience, so there's 100 and something thousand nurses getting sued, and then 3,000 actually are proven to be the nurse's actual fault.
Yeah.
In those cases where it was proven not to be their fault, besides just like obviously the person's just crazy and it's not the nurse's fault, what have you seen protect nurses the most? Has it been their charting? Has it been their past history, like working, like it just is obvious that they wouldn't have made this mistake. What is it that you think protects them? That we can take like an extra step besides just
Yeah.
not making mistakes.
Exactly, not making mistakes, but the fact is we all do make mistakes. I would say that the longer you practice, one of two things can happen. You do become more expert, but sometimes you become more complacent. And accidents happen when you become too complacent. And so that really isn't it. What I've seen is really charting. And there's a couple of things. If the nurse charts, they have to chart credibly. If you are a poor speller, that could damage you, because if you've written it so that it's almost impossible to understand, your spelling is poor, you lose credibility. And so you need to chart, and you need to chart carefully. And that's what I've seen. I personally, occasionally, when you journal what happened, your journal can be admissible in court.
So don't journal.
No, you
They
would-
say, oh, you should.
Oh, yeah,
journal.
you would never, I mean, they would never be able to call it unless you offered it.
Oh, okay.
But occasionally that has been, but again, that's a little weaker, but it would be really hard, to, write 10 years worth of journaling to, have one entry the way you wanted it to be, so. So that's not the best way, but that might help jog your memory, and so just some way I would document. One thing that I always did when I had employees that I was concerned about, or patients, I would often, date it, write it, and just keep it in a personal file. And it definitely was helpful when I needed it later.
Is that considered violation of HIPAA?
That's a good point. That was before HIPAA. I don't know the answer to that. So you
You don't
probably,
write names.
yeah,
or
you
anything.
might want to
But how
use
do
a
you
code
know
or
that?
something that you would
Yeah.
have a name in another place or something. So anyway, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out if you want me to. Okay, I think that that's pretty much the things that I was concerned about, that I thought maybe you didn't totally understand. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, let's talk about, for about 7 more minutes, let's talk about these. Would you like to go over the tech who uses cell phone? Some of you are a little bit disturbed about that.
The tech or the nursing student that got kicked out?
No, I'm talking about it was in the ER.
Yeah. Well, he went to go talk to the manager, and the manager's like, yeah, take a picture of it.
No.
Oh, no, that's not the manager. That's
Take care
right.
of it.
But, take care of it, yes. He took a picture of it, and it just seems like, wouldn't you obviously not take a picture of the patient?
I would think, but let me read you a few clues. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Kara, right?
The thing that was most concerning to me was that they didn't even look into his claim about harm to the patient. They're just like, use your phone, all right, you're done. And they didn't even ask him, well, what did you think was mistreatment to the patient? Well, let's look into it. We're gonna have to fire you, but let's look into it still. Like they didn't do anything like that.
Here, let me read you some clues. Remember, these are really short synopses. I'm sure that this trial probably went on for a day or two or more. I'm sure there were a lot of things, and they have to condense into this much print, 2 paragraphs or 2 columns. So, the patient asked the tech to remove the catheter. While removing a catheter, now listen carefully, the tech became concerned on what he considered to be an excessive amount of tape that was used to secure the catheter tubing to the patient's upper thigh. He believed this constituted mistreatment. Hi, Sister Miller. I can't. Miss Misty, I apologize. No, you're actually 5 minutes early. Oh, good. Okay. Feel free to jump in if you'd like. We'll finish this in just a second. You're great. So he believed this constituted mistreatment, and he wanted to bring it to the attention of hospital management. Okay, now he believed this. He wasn't sure. Now, first of all, he is a tech. Does he have the legal right to assess a patient? No. What did he just do? Assess the patient.
Well, but, I mean, if you're a CNA and you see that somebody's not being neglected, I
Okay.
think you have a right to bring that up to somebody.
You're absolutely right, Kara, and he should have gone to the charge nurse, shouldn't he? But he wanted to bring this to the attention of hospital management, so he wanted to assess the patient and take it all the way up, okay?
Oh, I was thinking it was just like his boss or something.
I know. You know what? You guys are still new, and so that's why I wanted to walk through this with you. So he asked the charge nurse if he could use his personal cell phone to take a patient as a pic of the patient's leg and the tape. He was told, just go ahead and deal with it. Now that's a little bit ambiguous, but I'm sure that a busy ER nurse probably said, just deal with it. You know, get on with your work and leave this alone. Do you see what I'm saying? But he took it as permission, and some of you probably took it as permission, right? Okay. Which he interpreted as permission to go ahead. He got verbal permission from the patient and took the picture. So he showed the cell phone to the emergency department manager. Now I want you to think, put yourself in the place of the manager. This is a leadership class, a management class. So you guys are the manager. So you've got a tech who is wanting to be an activist. He's wanting to take patient mistreatment in your unit up to administration. He asked if he could use his cell phone to take a picture, and you told him to get on with his work, just deal with it. He took the picture, he's brought it to you, and now he wants to take it to management. It's starting to paint just a little bit different picture, okay? So instead of hearing his concerns over the mistreatment of his patient, they told him he was being terminated for unauthorized use of his personal phone and potentially bringing litigation against the hospital. So then he sued for wrongful termination, and he said that they were pretexts for retaliation against him. But anyway, the courts refused. They refused to even hear it. To them, it was a frivolous suit. So there was no appeal. The technicality was that he violated HIPAA. But can you see where there are a number of other issues that are concerns? Does that help a little bit, Kara?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little?
Still is a little like.
I still think
So would
that
it be a different situation if like you took the tape off and there's a huge like
Of
rash or?
course there
But
would be.
because there was really, it was.
All this
his
was
own
an
opinion.
excessive amount of tape. And so he thought that constituted mistreatment because somebody had put a lot of tape on. Hannah?
And at the very beginning, it says that he's going in there and the patient says, like, that the catheter is bothering him, so he asks him to take it out. And that's why the tech even goes to look at it in the first place, because the tech was gonna take out the catheter. So I was like caught off by that before anything else even happened.
Yeah.
In that.
And remember, this was a psych patient who was in restraints due to intoxication and combative behavior. So now think about a psych patient that, you know, is all over the place. What do you think they're gonna do with their catheter? They're gonna try to rip it out, right? And so do you think maybe you would secure it with a bit more tape? So as you start to read this, you see that there are a lot of other considerations. Misty, do you have anything you would like to share with us?
Not knowing the full discussion, just coming in, I just hope you all recognize how important the chain of command is. You think, sometimes, you wonder, should I really follow it? Is this the best interest for the patient? But sometimes as the direct care staff, you might not know the full scope or the full story, or know what paperwork needs to be filed, or what extra precautions need to be taken, or maybe some changes in hospital policy. So chain of command is always the safest way, safest direction to follow. But speaking for our hospital here at Rexburg, Madison, we are all patient advocates, and we encourage even housekeeping or any frontline staff to speak up, but just always keep in mind that chain of command. So.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you. I think you're okay with the informed consent. You understood that the nurse really hadn't gotten full informed consent, and then the doctor went ahead and did the procedure, the patient died. So that may not have changed the outcome, but the informed consent was a big problem. And so sometimes you can't get a 5-minute informed consent. Sometimes you have to find other family members, you have to find out who the legal guardian or whatever is, so that they can make that informed consent if the patient can't.
I have a question about that. So
Okay, really quickly, yes.
was that an emergency procedure? I'm trying to remember.
I don't think it was. Let's see, the next day, and this is what was really concerning. The next day, the interventional radiologist, who was an independent contractor and not a hospital employee, went ahead with the procedure without discussing it with the patient, without checking to see if anyone had discussed it with the family, and without attempting to contact the family, only saying later on that it was an emergency. And so there were a lot of concerns with this one. As you can see, it isn't always just one or two things. Okay, really quickly, one more, and then Misty, you're up. Some of you were concerned about the nurse who got fired because she had legal power of attorney to access her ex-husband's patient chart. And so they fired her for doing it, but then they reinstated her, but I was surprised that that happened. Now, what did this nurse do that she really should not have done? Why did the hospital fire her? Okay, let me,
Oh, it was,
Yeah.
it was while she was working,
that's right.
that's why.
That's the key point. While she was on shift and working from her computer, she accessed her ex-husband's patient chart. Now, what should she have done? She had the power of attorney. She was supposed to get his medical records, but what should she have done? She should have followed the same process that anybody else has to. She should have gone to the records office or, wherever and, paid for the copies or whatever and got the copies just like everybody else is supposed to. She used her power of position inappropriately, and so that's why she got fired. Okay. Any others? Are we good? Savannah?
Do they try to take into account intention when they are bringing these cases forward, or is it just like, nope, it's for procedure, like?
You know what, I think they definitely look at intention, but I would say they look at it, but I'm not sure that really makes a difference in the end. Really, it's the law. Did you obey the law or did you disobey the law?
And yes, I would. And one example I can share with you, we actually had an employee have an experience where they had some lab work done at our hospital, at the facility, but our policy clearly states you have to go through to the proper direction. They were an employee, they could easily just log on, sign in, search their name, pull up their own labs, get the results. They're their labs. Is that, a problem with HIPAA? Absolutely. They have to go to the health information management. They have to sign a release. They have to get the records released to them because it's on a need to know. And that's even for their own records. So just whatever facility you work at, just make sure you understand the proper policy. But you have to be so careful with patient information, even if it's your own. If you don't have the right to know, or if your doctor hasn't had a chance to review the labs, or there's a bunch of things that need to happen, so just make sure you know. So in healthcare, you're the nurse at the bedside, you could just jump on and access your labs really quick. Nope, it has to be need to know. Who are you caring for? What information do you need to have for the day? Even if it's a patient on the floor and you're not caring for that patient, but you just think, oh, wonder what that nurse is doing in there. I'm gonna just jump on their patient record really quick. Absolutely not. You have to be, just caring for your patients and what you need to know as their primary care nurse at the bedside. So just some additional things.
Thank you. That's really critical, and that takes it a step further than this. Had you read a nurse being terminated because she'd accessed her own information, you probably would really have some questions about that. But that is how seriously hospitals take HIPAA, and they have to. They have to. Okay, I said this was the last one, but I do want to do one more really quickly because some of you were disturbed about this one. The antidepressant, where the nurse provided information to the patient's wife from an outdated drug book, and he committed suicide. Okay, so there are a couple of things that I want you to understand about this one because it's probably not quite as clear. The lawsuit was based on the fact that the FDA had issued an advisory bulletin in March 2004, and he committed suicide on July the 23rd, so about 3 months after the FDA put out the advisory bulletin. To inform healthcare providers of the risk of suicide in depressed patients newly started on antidepressant medication. In May, the manufacturer, so the FDA put out an advisory, then the manufacturer circulated a letter to healthcare professionals that was basically the same as the advisory. Now, I want to go back to the start of this. And I want you to listen carefully to this. So, the patient's Paxil prescription was filled at the VA pharmacy on July 26, 2004. 2 days later, the patient's wife phoned the same facility and left a message that she wanted to discuss her husband's medication. A nurse decided to return her call. Who was she calling for? Who prescribed the medication?
Physician, that's a consult medicine. Yeah, that's.
So the nurse was being helpful, but really the doctor should have returned the call. Or the nurse should have checked with the doctor to make sure, because there was some information that he knew. Now, Misty, I don't know what you do at Madison, but and remember this was a psychiatric patient. So I was the director of nursing at a psychiatric facility, and anytime we got an FDA bulletin or we got a manufacturer's advisory about any medications, we posted it in the nurse's room where we had the medications, and so those things were there. I don't know what this hospital did, it doesn't say, but the fact that there were 2 different advisories sent out, probably the information was there, but she wanted to be helpful. She grabbed an old drug book, she looked it up and didn't find anything. Misty, do you guys post
We do.
those bulletins and advisories?
We do, and our pharmacy is very proactive, you know, to send notification alerts, and we try to discuss those items at our administrative safety huddles, and, you know, our local pharmacies are really proactive, and we also work with our social worker in-house, you know, just so they're aware of, you know, any patient needs or concerns, so they can keep an eye on, and we also have MedRec, individuals that go through the medication reconciliation, and they're looking closely at medications, and so there are a lot of barriers in place to prevent errors and misses and risks from happening. So
Thank you. So there probably was some information out, otherwise, this may not have gotten where it did. So I don't want you all going home thinking I'm going to lose my license because of an error before I hardly get it. Remind me again what you guys said in the discussion. What were your conclusions? What do you need to do to avoid these kinds of risks? Document. Don't what?
Oh, I just said thoroughly.
Oh, thoroughly. Thank you. Document thoroughly. What else? Even before that, before you even start documenting, what do you want to do?
Understand the nurse practice.
Understand the Nurse Practice Act and what other?
Policy and procedures.
Exactly. Somebody wrote, I don't know where the policies and procedures are in my hospital. I would really suggest that, you know, when you're hired and you begin orientation, I would ask that question, and I would be reading them.
And it can be overwhelming if your first, you know, week there at the facility. For example, when you start at Madison, there's close to, for RNs, 200 policies to read. I mean, it's pretty extensive, but they're accessible at any time. Questions can be asked. So, but very important, wonderful advice.
So not every nurse is going to do that. You'll have other orientees who don't choose to, but if you want to be an outstanding nurse, if you want to be a safe nurse and a good nurse, I would suggest that you take that exam.
Do facilities have like an option to take the book home or something so you can actually read it, or?
You know, it's interesting you ask that. Years ago, we used to have printed policies, but we found that to be a liability because the policies are all electronic now, and they're updated very frequently. There's a review cycle on all policies, so they'll come due every quarter, and it just rotates through hundreds of policies. So to have a printed manual that, you know, someone could take home, huge risk of, you know, the policies being outdated or wrong, and then we have employees misinformed, and
maybe employees pulling one version and then another employee having a different version. So there's very tight control with policies, and it's all electronic. So majority of hospitals are this way. So we encourage you just to log on and get on to Policy Tech for our facility and just read the policies. That way you're going to get the most current updated.
So that's accessible at home?
It depends on the facility. There's some tight restrictions there as well, because if you're doing, work from home, reading policies from home, you need to be reimbursed for your time, and so have to clock in. So we try to give you time, downtime when you're a shift, working your shift as a nurse, or during that orientation period, we give you a block of time as well to kind of just thoroughly read through as many as you can. But it's challenging, and I'll be honest, I do find some nurses will just click through saying they've read the policy and have not. But clicking that you've read the policy, that binds you to be following the policy. And therefore, if an error happens, we take you through what's called just culture. Did you intend to act? Was the policy clear? Did the individual have the knowledge and training needed to, and then we'll pull the record saying, Misty read that policy on July 8th of 2016. She knew that that was the expectation. And then I would be held accountable for reading that policy. So never just click through or take that lightly. Know what your hospital policy is. And it can be different from every facility, so make sure you know.
So you mentioned that they were updated like quarterly. So are nurses expected to read those like 200 plus procedures every quarter?
Yeah, well, they rotate through. So like you could have like 5 a month repopulate on your policy review program, and you'll get alerts and emails saying, Misty, you have some policies to read, and then that will trigger, oh, I better jump on, I have a couple minutes, can review a couple policies. But I try to always stay up on mine because they can pile up, and you could have 200, and then it seems so overwhelming to get through. But, those policies include things like, proper lift techniques, or, fire drills, or, it could be things that apply to the whole population, and then policies specific to nursing. So.
Thank you. Okay, Alex.
So you said you reimburse the nurses for reading policies?
So we pay you for training and for, reading your policies and, doing anything work related. So absolutely, because our expectation is that you're reading those. So, we will pay you for the time that you invest in making sure those policies are read. So, but during your employee evaluations, if you're falling behind or not getting your policies read, you'll be held accountable there too. So, but yeah, we don't expect you to go home and on your own time, do all of that work.
How would you advise to remember all of those? That's that's impossible to memorize.
It is impossible. So this is why I love the electronic option. Let's say I'm asked to set up an art line in ICU, and it's been several months since I've done that task. So what I recommend for all nurses, new or veteran nurses that maybe just need a refresher, if you're getting ready to start a procedure or something's unfamiliar, or if you have any questions at all, just pull up the policy really quick, print it out, just run through it really quick, or, just brush up on the policy and make sure that you are aligned with the organization. But it is impossible, and for as often as things change, it's just wise to but if you do have any questions about anything, just make sure you're searching for it in policy or checking with your charge nurse or leadership, department leadership to, see, and they can direct you, yeah, policy has changed, maybe you better look at that, but they try to keep you aware and in the loop. And then a lot of the policies too don't change at all, they just stay the same, but they still are reviewed, very frequently, and you'll see no changes made to this policy, annual review, and those things will remain constant. But yeah, it can be a lot to know.
So that seems pretty easy to do, but I think also we can run into a situation where we feel pretty confident, we think, oh, I know how to do this, and then we look at the policy later and we find out we clearly didn't know what we were doing. So how do we prevent that from happening? Because we will think we know what we're doing.
Truthfully, even if we're reading our policies, we know things forwards and backwards. To err is human. We're all going to make mistakes, and facilities try to design processes and implement processes that are planned so that there are barriers and checks in place, you know, co-signing medications, or, you know, pharmacy putting hard stops in the medication record to, you know, populate an alert if there's, you know, a danger in any way. So all of those little examples are barriers that are put into place to make sure that we are taking those, you know, extra precautions to avoid errors. But just so you guys know, as perfect of a nurse as you want to be, and I'm sure you will be, I can promise you, you will make a mistake. Whether forgetting to, you know, release the roller clamp from your antibiotic that you just hung, and you go in an hour later to do your hourly check, and you're like, the antibiotic should have been done 30 minutes ago. I forgot to, you know, check the roller clamp, and my IV hasn't been running. And so there are little mistakes like that that happen, and some big mistakes that can happen. But just, you know, double check, recheck, just try to keep up on the policies. But there will be mistakes, and, you know, just according to your vigilance in preventing those, that's crucial. And it doesn't matter if you've done something 100 times, mistakes still can be made. So just that awareness and, you know, that hunger to want to do things right, to follow the policy and procedures, and that will protect you in the long run as well. You know, if you know, you've done something and mistakes happen, but you follow policy, you know, that protects you. So you're always aware of those requirements put forth by your facility. Great, good questions. You guys are
Thank you. Those are wonderful answers. So really, this is the reason we emphasize critical thinking so much. Think through things. If something doesn't seem right, there's the first clue. So do that, and then, as Misty mentioned, document. If you follow the policy, if you've documented that you've done it, you know, if you've been honest with your vital signs, with your, you know, you've done full assessments instead of, you know, done a quick one and guessed on some things, that's where you'll get into trouble. So, you know, really create a process and then follow your process, just like you follow policies and procedures. Okay, I'm going to pass out a handout. It's entitled Unethical Behaviors in Nursing. And this is taken from some research in which they looked at students who did semi-unethical things or unethical things in their nursing program, and then how it relates to doing unethical things in nursing. There is a relationship. So these are just for your own personal information. Fill them out. If you see things that you're doing in school that would be considered unethical, really consider where that might lead you if you do this in nursing. So I'll pass this out. Misty, if you would like to come up, and Holly isn't here today to introduce you, so would you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, it's my pleasure. My name is Misty Gordon. I am the director of Med-Surg ICU at Madison Memorial Hospital. I've had, just to give you a little background on my career, I actually sat in your chair many years ago and was a student here at BYU, Idaho. And I love this school, I love this program. You guys are going to do amazing things in your careers, and you will be able to participate in a profession that I think is one profession that we can truly serve other people and almost feel, you know, we're going to work, we're getting paid, but we're able to serve our brothers and sisters. had opportunities to work as a cardiac nurse. I've worked on med-surg, ICU. I have a lot of variety in the nursing career, and it's fun. I think that's why this is such a great career choice, because you can do pediatrics, you can do, you know, OB. There's so many wonderful things you can do with this career. So it's just a pleasure meeting you and spending time with you. Sister Forbush and Sister Miller actually have invited me here today to talk about quality. And my understanding is you talk about quality and safety in this class, this curriculum for this class quite a bit. And I want to share with you, Holly serves actually on our hospital board. And so I gave a presentation on some implementations that I was doing at Madison to improve the quality and safety of our facility. And she invited me to come and speak to the students. And I was thrilled. I love spending time with you. I love it when you come to do clinicals up at the hospital. And I understand you guys are, you know, further on in your rotation. You're not brand new students here. But thank you for your service at Madison and our local area hospitals. You guys, I always love it when you come. You take a weight off of the nurses' shoulders that is really valuable, and I hope that you glean a lot of knowledge and experience from our nursing team as well. So, but I'm excited to talk to you about quality. It's something I'm so passionate about. And I do have a little presentation on a jump drive here. I'm not sure how to work your system, but I will.
Probably I'm not either, but I can figure that out.
Should we put it on? Turn on. No, we're really going to turn it on.
If you don't, just call me.
I don't like.
Oh.
Yes.
There's no
Okay, so tell me about quality. Why is quality important in healthcare and in nursing? Why is quality important?
It creates better outcomes.
Okay, patient outcomes. Why are patient outcomes crucial to what we do in the hospitals?
Well, that's why they're there, to get a better outcome, and it also improves age caps and makes people want to come to your hospital because they know that you'll take care of them.
Very good, very good. So something interesting, you know, that seems like a no-brainer. Of course, you know, we want to take care of people. We want to have great outcomes for our patients. We want our patients to get better and, you know, have the best quality of life that they can have. Absolutely, that's what we strive for. But even on a higher level, in order for hospitals to ensure their future, they have to have those outcomes because our payer sources are paying based on those quality indicators and quality outcomes. So let's say we have a patient at the hospital, they come to our facility, we discharge them home, and they're readmitted within 30 days. That stinks because we don't get the reimbursement. We don't get paid for that readmission visit. And not that it's all about the payment, because you look at it as well. Think if you were a patient. You know, you go to the hospital to receive treatment, you want to get feeling better, you want to have, you know, the best quality of life that you can, and you have to go back to the hospital again because they didn't get it right the first time. Now that's not always the case. There are times when the diagnosis could be totally unrelated. So I go in, I have pneumonia, and then I get in a car accident and I break my leg and have to go in for an inpatient stay. It's still a readmission. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so challenging for hospitals. So if it's within 30 days or if they're readmitted to a different facility, that's still still a readmission penalty for facilities. So quality outcomes are crucial for our patients, for ensuring our future, for keeping the costs of healthcare in America down. We're one of the cost of healthcare in the United States is extremely high compared to other countries. And do we have better outcomes? No, but our healthcare costs are really expensive. So we're working on that. We're working on that as a nation to bring these costs down, to have better outcomes and improve quality, and ensure our future by being able to get the reimbursements we need to keep hospitals open. So, and I apologize, I did have a question, a hand over here, and I didn't get to. Do you still have a question? I'm
You
so
answered
sorry.
it. You were just fine. I was just wondering if the readmission wasn't related to the first one, then that kind of stinks.
I know, it does, and it's so frustrating because we do all we can to prevent readmissions, but it could be totally unrelated to the, presenting diagnosis, and we still get that penalty.
So, when, Miranda Gonzalez, is that her name? The CEO?
Oh, Rachel.
Rachel.
Sorry, yes.
When she came in, she talked about how it's focused on, Miranda, Rachel. You're focusing on patient care as a facility and not on other aspects. And so when you talk about quality and people being readmitted to the hospital, now the focus is being placed more on what Madison Memorial owns for primary care facilities. So is it the same thing as far as reimbursement, that if a patient goes back to a primary care facility, they're not charged again?
So I'm not sure I quite understand your question. So are you saying with readmissions?
Yeah, so if I go to the ER and then I'm not taken care of, I go back in a couple days still with the same problem for me or my children, and then I don't get another hospital visit paid or charged for me. But if I go to the primary care physician and says, well, my problem's still not taken care of, is it the same thing, that the facility doesn't get more reimbursement?
It's really interesting because as of right now, CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, are really basing readmission penalties for inpatient services. So any outpatient procedure at this point doesn't really impact the readmission rates, nor does ER visits. However, they are looking at the frequent visits to ER, and that's probably soon to follow. Penalties for hospitals that have frequent ER visits that they're not, treating the patient. And it's frustrating too, because you do have patients that maybe aren't quite compliant with their plan of care. We can tell them, we can teach them, we can prescribe them the correct medications, but they're not taking their meds, they're not following the diet. We have all of those issues, and so we've had to get very creative on how we manage those patients that, maybe don't have that health literacy to help them understand the plan of care so that they can, follow their treatment exactly so that they can get better, they can improve. But it's a good question. It really is, and it as far as it affecting the patient, you look at it from all sides, and just to Rachel's point, Madison Memorial Hospital is so patient and family centered. That's our focus. I mentioned the reimbursements and everything else. That's important to ensure our future. But bottom line, it's about our patients and families. That's the most important thing. We want to keep their costs low. We want to make sure that we're treating them and helping them, have those outcomes that we talked about earlier. So very good, very good. You guys are bright.
Sorry to stay on this topic, but I know that there's hypochondriacs out there that will go into the ER all the time. And so how do you deal with that situation where there's really nothing wrong with them, but you still have to treat them until you know that there's something wrong? Because that's a readmission.
Yeah. And it's so tricky too, because you have those and you also have the pain seekers, that they just come in and they just want, some patient. And sometimes they're coined drug seekers that'll just come into the ER just over and over again. And that's a tight balancing act as well, because just as you describe people coming in, and there's nothing more we can do for them, that falls under age caps too, because they could be surveyed, and a lot of the surveys have been geared towards the inpatient setting, but more and more we're seeing outpatient surveys and emergency medicine surveys specifically geared towards the patient experience in those settings. So it's challenging, it's really challenging. A lot of communication, a lot of patients from the ER providers, encouraging continuity of care, and referring patients to their primary care provider in the community, so that we're utilizing the services there. But it can be very challenging, and sometimes we find ourselves just, at a loss. How can we help these patients? How can we help them understand? We try to do care conferences and pull families in, and just those frequent flyers too. We just try to really embrace them and help them, find a better way, get them linked up with those services in the community that will really help them. But it's a challenge. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So is this a nationwide standard?
Yeah.
Okay, not just.
Nationwide. This is absolutely hit nationwide. A lot of it's driven with healthcare reform and, the CMS, the Centers for Medicaid, Medicare. And what we're finding is other payer sources, so other insurance companies. I mean, some of you may have the student insurance DMVA, maybe some of us have Blue Cross, who knows? But a lot of the payer sources are following suit with CMS guidelines. So, that's something to be aware of too. The government will say, okay, we're not going to pay if the patient's readmitted. And so, Blue Cross will say, well, hey, if you're going to do that, we're going to do that. And it really creates, and every insurance company is a little unique and has their little different spin on their reimbursement rates. But bottom line is every single insurance company, hospital, the government, they're really focused on outcomes and patient satisfaction. They want, if they're paying for healthcare, they want it to be the best that it can be. So, yeah.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So if the patient comes in within the 30 days, they're still getting charged, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The insurance just
So
paying for it.
It's can be complicated because, like I said, all insurances and if they're on Medicaid, Medicare, typically the hospitals are mainly penalized at this point for Medicare and Medicaid patients for their readmissions. But hospitals overall are trying to avoid all readmissions, but it's within 30 days and it has to be an inpatient admission. So, if they come to the hospital, but they just need a few little outpatient labs or something within the 30 days, that doesn't apply. So, and I can almost bet you by the time you're done with school and, out in the workforce, starting your first job, the rules will have changed just a little bit more. So it's exciting. Healthcare is always changing.
Is there anything in place to give patient incentive of complying with healthcare regimens and things that they may do to avoid that?
No, and it's so challenging, because it feels like we can teach, we can have the patients, do teach back. We can do, there's a lot of, I don't know if you've heard of patient care navigators or home visits that facilities will do to just kind of help the patient along. We've involved home health a lot. So we're just trying to work together with, all of the support resources that we can find to make sure those outcomes are good. But it's really challenging. But as far as the patient themselves being accountable or having ownership, not directly. But the cost of healthcare affects us all. So anyway, but just really quick, at Madison we're obsessed with quality and safety. That's our goal. I'm not sure if this will advance or not, or if I'm even. I'm not sure, maybe I should advance it on this. Okay, so a couple of years ago, quality and patient safety at Madison, we had an improvement model that was not as effective as it could be. We had frontline staff that would see an issue concerning quality or safety on the floor, and it would be identified and kind of just passed off to our quality director saying, oh my goodness, there's a problem on med-surg with the transition of patient care, fix it. And then it was just left to quality to figure out. Quality had fixed the issues. There was no shared governance, there was no buy-in from frontline staff, and there was a very insufficient process structure. So we went to work and we really did a root cause analysis and found that our approach was very reactive. We were waiting for things to happen, and then we'd report them to quality for them to find process improvements to make sure that we were doing things correctly to have the outcomes that we need. This just was, this reactive approach, there was no sustainability, there was no accountability, there wasn't frontline engagement because it felt like a lot of these things were flavors of the month, you know, just something that quality thought we should do. So we'll do it for a little while and then it'll fall off the radar and we won't have to worry about it anymore. It was just really hard to have that frontline engagement. And then departments became very siloed. So, you know, ER would define a process and med-surg would define a process surrounding the same exact thing, but there was no standardization. So if you were floating to another department or if a code was called and you're going to, you know, the ER or med-surg or to the ICU, there was just a lot of variation and it made it hard to work together. So we knew something had to happen. So we started our journey to transformation with a culture revolution. We joined in partnership with the University of Utah and we worked on staff development and business efficiency. The partnership allowed Madison to take advantage of educational opportunities and just some great resources to help, you know, our small 69-bed facility here in Rexburg, Idaho, and glean the expertise of the University of Utah, who's top 10 in the nation in healthcare quality. So to begin a culture revolution in an organization, you know, to get from this volume-based medicine that we've been practicing for years, you know, it's just like, how many patients can we see? How many beds can we fill? Oh, hurry, get that room clean so we can get the next patient in. No, it's all about being proactive, preventative, making sure that the health care of the community is improving. It's so much more. So this transformation from volume-based healthcare to, you know, really this value-based healthcare was crucial. And so how do we get there? We had to start with our internal culture. How many of you have had a job? Where have you worked? Like I worked as a janitor.
Yeah.
Here at Ricks College, I got up at 4 in the morning. I cleaned the Hart building. It was awesome. Got me through nursing school. But any job that you've held, think about the culture of that job. Was there a lot of synergy, teamwork, people willing to help and, you know, make improvements? You know, you do something one way. Well, why don't we do it that way? I mean, there's a better way. Or like technology, like I remember when I was a child and we had, you guys probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but the telephone that's stuck to the wall with the 10-foot phone cord that you'd reach around and you go into the back room to talk to your, you know, friend on the phone in secret. And we've come a long way. We all carry cell phones now. But to get people to change from, you know, the way we did things to the way we need to do things now, culture change is hard. It's really hard. But it's fundamental to the health of an organization. So before we could even think about changing from a volume to value organization, we had to focus on our culture. What type of organization were we? What did we want to become? So we really focused on these 3 phases of change. And we started with strengthening our culture with our employees, our frontline employees, making sure those housekeepers knew that they're part of the team and they could speak up. We also moved next after we strengthened the culture to the volume to value phase and then to changing our care delivery. So phase one, I touched on a little bit. We really wanted to transform our culture to become one that was obsessed with promoting quality and safety. This drove education opportunities. If we saw, hey, we've noticed over the last month a slight increase in falls, well, we're going to do something about that. We're going to take action, and as a team, we're going to develop on the front line how to prevent those falls. So really getting that employee engagement, and then working as well with our leadership in the C-suite, also our physician, our providers, and just really improving that communication. So the implementation of a morning huddle was born. At 8:44, we've adjusted the time slightly. At 8:44 every single day at Madison Memorial Hospital, you will see all of our leadership team, our direct leadership, department directors, executives, every department is represented at this morning huddle. We discuss safety concerns, our quality stats, any patient satisfaction concerns, and it's really unified our department and strengthened our culture. It's really made a big difference in the way we work together as a team. With that employee engagement and our journey to becoming a value-based organization, we had a big celebration, and we all decided that we would commit to excellence, and we had every employee sign this big banner, and we began our journey together, united, focused on adding to that value-based care. So the next phase of this effort, we wanted to really focus on becoming a patient-centered facility. For years, it's kind of been, you go to a hospital and you see signs like no visitors, or visiting hours are this, or no patients beyond this point, no family beyond this point. It was all focused around hospital needs, hospital preferences. Every decision was based on, well, what's easiest for the nurse? Or, oh, well, what does the doctor want to do? No more. We are all about what is best for our patients and families. We developed a patient and family advisory council where any decision that's made in the hospital, we vet through that committee, even down to the paint color of the walls. What do our patients want? The hospital is for them, it's for our community. So we vet all decisions through that committee. So it's really interesting, and it's a pretty valuable volunteer-based committee, the Patient and Family Advisory Council. Yeah.
Has that affected the care of the patients if there's over-involvement?
It's been, there was a lot of concern about that, and a lot of fear for being transparent. Because when we meet in that advisory council, I bring up stuff like, okay, patients, family members, we're not meeting the mark here. We're failing our patients with our discharge teaching. What would you like to see as a patient? When you come up and you're discharged from our facility, what would you like us to teach you, talk to you about? Like, how do you want that process to go? Because we were failing our discharges. We'd get the order to discharge a patient, and then it would take like 2 hours to get them out the door. So our patients were frustrated, nursing was frustrated because the process took too long. We were worried about making sure the patient was educated enough so we wouldn't have readmissions. And it's hard as a department director to say, okay, I'm being transparent here. This is not working. Can you please give us any feedback? We know from the medical side what works for us and what you need as a patient. But what do you need as a patient and family member? Your loved one that's coming to pick you up, they have a job, they're working, they need this discharge process to be efficient, and they need to be able to remember what they're being told, their plan of care, so that when they go home they can follow their medication, their diet, their everything they need to understand to continue to improve. But it was scary. It was scary to be so transparent. And not to say we do vet a lot through the Patient and Family Advisory Council, but they're not the final word. But we absolutely take into consideration the viewpoint of our patient and families. So it's really interesting. But doesn't that make sense? Who are we serving? We're serving the patient. They should have a voice. They should tell us what works for them. And we've all had an opportunity to be a patient. We're all customers of the healthcare system. So what we need as a patient is so much different than what I need as a nurse. I mean, it's like, no more call lights. Don't press your call light. I'll be back in a minute. Or, oh, you're up to the bathroom every hour. So I wish I could just place a Foley so I don't have to keep getting you up to the bathroom. I have 4 other patients I'm trying to take care of. But is that in the best interest of the patient? No, to insert a Foley for that would be the risk for infection. I mean, you know, so there's just, it's not going to be hospital healthcare driven anymore. It's just more about the patient and their needs and really involving them in their healthcare decisions and plans. But great question. But it is hard and it's evolving. It's great. How many of you have seen a billboard like this, especially like just, I don't know, maybe sometimes you guys go on a visit down to Utah or other larger cities and you may see these billboards that says, ER wait time, just 4 minutes. We'll get you in and out and just, you know, so come to our ER. So what do you think of when you see those signs? What does that say to you? Yeah. And it sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, sweet. If I do need an ER, they have pretty good wait times. I'll go there. But when you're focused on quality and safety, is this really the indicator you want to look at? Probably not. Like, how fast are they going to get me in and out? And if we're moving from a volume-based to a value-based organization, if we're focused on wait times, we're missing the mark. We should be focused on those outcomes. That's really where our emphasis should be. So we look at these signs and we kind of smile. Are we sending the right message with these wait time billboards in healthcare? So our goal at Madison was to strengthen that care delivery. So a few things that I won't have a lot of time to go over today, and maybe you've already learned about some of these in this class. At Madison, we've developed a risk register, a risk matrix, and we utilize what's called a bow tie diagram. And what these specific tools are for, as you can imagine, just even in our discussion today, can you even just fathom all of the little processes that take place and from pharmacy, all the disciplines, pharmacy, OT, PT, nursing, dietary, physicians, case managers, social workers, all of these disciplines have to come together to help the patient. So with all of that, we've identified the only way we can improve quality and redesign process improvements is by identifying our greatest risk. And once that's identified, where we should focus our improvement energy, that helps us become that quality driven, value-based organization that we want to become. So just to explain that in just really simple terms. So let's say I'm a frontline staff member and I love ice cream. And I go to our cafeteria and ice cream's too soft. And it's a problem because I want to be a happy employee at work and I want good ice cream. So I could submit a request, hey, you know, the Paragon needs to work on, you know, their ice cream bar or whatever. This is an improvement that I would like to recommend that we make. And I know that this is really extreme. But then on the flip side, we have a process problem with the intervention for allergy alerts in Meditech is not dropping, it's not working. There's a glitch in the system's broken. So I know this is a no-brainer, we don't need to run it through any matrix, but we'll take both of these improvement efforts run them through the matrix, and it helps us identify where we should focus our improvement energy. So obviously we're gonna focus on allergies because that's what we're at greatest risk for errors. But in a hospital with all of those disciplines working together, I bet in my department alone, currently I probably have close to 20 PI projects, performance improvement projects open, and probably 20 more that I could write up today that we could start improvement work. But that could become so overwhelming. So with this risk register, risk matrix, and utilizing a bow tie diagram, it's helped us to really, streamline and focus our improvement energy. So that bow tie diagram tool, if you have not had a chance to use it, I know you probably talked about the fishbone diagram. I love the bow tie. If you have the chance to really learn about that, it's awesome. It just is shaped like a bow tie, like a gentleman's bow tie, has two ends. It has the undesirable event in the middle. That's the center of the bow tie. And to the left, you see the series of events that could happen. So could have led up to that undesirable event. So if it was a medication error, we'll list the things that could have led to that medication error. Not enough training. The nurse was helping train a student. The nurse actually had not slept for 24 hours because it could be a multiple of things. And then with that left side of the bow tie diagram, it's filtered down and you identify barriers that you could put into place as an organization with the process to prevent that undesirable event. So when you have time, research it. You could use it for anything in your life, any problem, even just personal things, like not even related to healthcare. It's a great tool. I think you'd really, really enjoy it. We talked a little bit about transparency when we discussed the question that we had over here on this side of the room. And transparency in healthcare is hard. I mean, nursing is the most trusted profession. And to admit we've made an error, made a mistake, that's devastating. That is so hard, so hard. And this could be everything you hear of hospitals that have had wrong site surgeries, or they're huge mistakes that have been made. And it's hard to be transparent. It's hard to be open about areas that we're missing the mark. So we had our CEO, Rachel, that you guys have met. She gave me permission to use this image at a conference that was held at the University of Utah that I was asked to be a guest speaker. And I thought it was pretty incredible. There were providers from all over the nation, top leading hospitals, and here we are, this little tiny hospital in Rexburg, Idaho, and our CEO had the courage to be transparent about this situation. I want to give you a little bit of background. The gentleman in the white shirt brought his wife into the ER, and she was in tremendous amount of abdominal pain. And the ER was super busy, and they were trying to get patients triaged through the back. They had an ambulance come in. There's all of this other commotion going on, busy night in the ER. But the patient didn't know all that was going on. The admitting clerk didn't know all that was going on. And this poor patient in the front lobby, in the waiting room, just had so much pain. We've gotten her settled into a wheelchair, and she was in so much pain, she slid down out of the wheelchair, didn't fall, but just slid down. She was in so much pain, just holding her abdomen, and was laying on the floor in the ER. So me, as a nursing director, I'm like, get that patient in a bed. Oh my goodness, even if the doctor can't come in and see her, just get her in a bed. So we go back to culture, and we talk about scope of practice and just that chain of command. Well, here you can see like our admitting clerk, she's sitting right here at the desk. She's like, I I don't know what to do. And in the video, if you replay it back, she's kind of leaning up over, are you okay? She's doing all that she feels in her power, trying to help the patient. Somebody got her a warm blanket, but there were other staff members walking by that were with our engineering services. They just walked by like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. But this is where our facility, we are changing that culture absolutely 100% to, proceed until apprehended. If you see a patient that's suffering or hurting, do what's in the best interest of the patient and just proceed until apprehended. Try to get them in a comfortable position. Try to change the way we deliver healthcare. This patient, the outcomes were good, everything was fine, but just to be, in so much pain that you're on the floor in the waiting room and, just wanting some help, we can do better. We can do better. And I think that Rachel was very courageous to be able to, suggest that we could share this. And I love that about her. She's like, we missed the mark, we can do better. And so we shared that, we talked about that. So this is a bunch of data that we won't spend too much time on today, but just really quick, with our culture evolution, prior to this implementation of all of these improvement efforts, we only had 4 PI projects that were formally written. And at the time of this presentation, we were almost at 60 improvement projects that we were actively working on as an organization, and then it wasn't all dependent on quality improving the efforts. We were together as a team working on our care delivery. So we talk about quality improvement, and I want you to know you will never arrive in your whole career. There's always new technology, new advances, new electronic health record systems. Things will never stop changing in healthcare, and they'll never stop, improving. So always keep in mind, even though you're actively trying to improve your workplace, the improvements will never stop. And just so you're aware, wherever you apply for a position, if you can tell your employer, as a frontline employee, I will look for ways to improve workflow, to improve the quality and service and safety of our patients, and I will be that tool. You will just stand out. You will stand out as an applicant. For me to be in my office on the floor and try to redesign your workflow as a nurse out working with the patients in the ICU or on med-surg, it's pretty easy for me to see where we need to fix it, but I'm not the one doing the work. I'm not the one at the bedside caring for the patient. Have I been there? Yes, but things have changed a lot since then too. So we need frontline employees that are really doing the work, never stopping improving. So always strive to strengthen the culture of your workplace environment. Always keep in mind that patients and families are first. We should always try to put them first and really focus on that value, adding that value of quality and safety. And then change the way we look at care delivery. It's no longer just the hospital working independently and all of these community agencies. There's a lot of initiative to become a healthier population. So keep that in mind as well. And then just remember, we're better together. This slide was geared towards our partnership with the University of Utah. But I want to just tailor that a little bit to, as nurses, we have to band together, we have to help each other and be advocates for our patients in the hospital and, out in the workforce. So that's the conclusion of this formal presentation, and I don't know how much time we have for questions or anything, or maybe we've gone over.
No, we have about, it's a quarter after when we're finished.
Okay. So just if you have any further questions, or I would love to answer any questions you have. Do you feel a little more passionate about quality?
Yeah.
That's my goal. I really, honestly, like in this nursing career, you cannot have enough passion for quality and safety. And it doesn't matter even if it's the smallest little thing about hand washing or, just making sure that you're using chlorhexidine before, like a procedure or, just any little thing that nursing can do to drive that. It is so important. Yes.
One quick question. So I was just wondering, so if you find there's a problem in like a policy or something and you find that like with the root cause analysis that there's a problem and you need to fix it, what's the average time that it takes to fix? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And in fact, in my opinion, too long. And I think a lot of people are nervous to kind of challenge policy. So as you guys read them, because a lot of the policy writers are those that are in their office, like the directors, administration, they're not on the front line. So the policy writers are thinking, oh, this looks good, this is great. But you're blowing the whistle saying, hey, Misty, there's a problem. We don't do it this way anymore. Or we don't have this supply anymore. Or our workflow doesn't fit this policy. So blow the whistle, speak up. But sometimes it could take between the policy writer, the reviewer, to get it changed a couple weeks to months, especially if we have to have for a policy change. Some policies, we have to have a provider's signature at a division meeting, division of surgery or division of medicine. If it's in regards to any pharmacy change or pharmacy protocol, we have to take those to division meetings, so it can take a long time. Yeah, but please, if you read policies in your facilities, just blow the whistle. Don't just read them and move on. And it's crucial to patient safety and to your safety as an employee as well. It's a great question. Thank you. Good job. Okay, guys, well, just thank you so much. I love spending time with you. I hope to, be able to see you, work with you. If you're sticking around in Rexford, I'd love to see your application. So just thank you for your time today. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was so good to have you. Thank you. Excited. I mean, we talk about the hard things that we have to do, the things we have to know, but really, as Misty said, there are checkpoints and stop points in place, and quality improvement, team, policies and procedures, they're there for your protection. You guys really are going to be okay. All right? Have a good week.
Seattle's so strange. Seattle's so strange. Yes, I've ridden the ferry like